Jay, before we get talking about this season, I want to ask you about last year, because one thing that stuck with me was watching some of your players digest the loss to Vegas. And we saw Leon Draisaitl. It's about as broken as I've seen a player and a team coming off of a loss in the playoffs. We don't really get a sense of what a coach's emotions are like. How do you process that?
Well, I think the big thing our coaching staff looked to do was to take the emotion out of any response. Obviously, immediately after a series, you feel a certain way, but we wanted to take a little bit of time, make sure that we were looking at things clearly below surface level. For me, it was about trying to figure out things that we can do better as we move forward. Also have the realization of having been in this league for as long as that I have, is that teams sometimes have to go through certain experiences in order to find a way to push through. If you look at the Vegas Golden Knights last year, I think they were 4 out of 6 years in the Final Four. Prior to that, obviously Colorado had some disappointments before they got to where they wanted to be, and certainly the Tampa Bay Lightning before them. So for me, I think you go through a situation like we went through. It's about digging deeper than surface level and then finding a way to repurpose that disappointment so that you can learn your lessons and set yourself up as you move forward.
So maybe a year prior to that, losing to Colorado, I don't want to say there was a feeling of satisfaction, but you guys had gotten to a new level that you hadn't been to, that it was almost, and the way the series ended, that maybe you felt like, okay, the response this time to Vegas did it feel different to you?
Well, it did feel a little bit different. Obviously, the 2 playoff runs, there were some differences. We made it to the 3rd round against Colorado. Not that you're not satisfied. We're competitive people. We're in it to win it, and it was disappointing that we lost to Colorado. But from where the team was when Dave Manson and I came up in the beginning of February there, I think the team was seven points out or something like that. To get as far as we did, there was a little sense of that we're heading in the right direction. The trajectory was in the right direction. We were disappointed we didn't beat Colorado, but we felt we were hitting some markers along the way. I think last year, against Vegas, we had an understanding that whoever came out of that series had a good chance to find a way through and break through. We lost to a good hockey team. Our hats are off to them. They did a good job, and nothing should be taken away from them. But for us, it's about, as I said, repurposing that disappointment and learning some of the lessons that were key in that series.
So at some point during the offseason, the school year ends, you pack up, you go wherever you spend your summer in Ontario. And how does a coach spend their summer? What do you think about? How much does that loss eat at you? How much did you watch the rest of the playoffs and watch what Vegas did? Do you learn anything from it?
I think you do. I think, as I said, you want to make sure you're looking at things with a sober mindset, so you're not hyper emotional. I think you take a little bit of time immediately after that series. You have your exit meetings. For me, I spent a lot of time in the following weeks as the playoffs continued on, studying different teams, what was working, what maybe wasn't working, delving into studying our own team game, and putting our coaching staff to work doing the same thing. Came back together. I think around the draft time, had a good idea of where we wanted to go in certain situations. Spent some time discussing players around free agency. And then eventually when I get back to Ontario, it's not that you turn your brain off from the coaching side of things. You're just in a different environment. And that's part of, you and I were talking off camera, that's part of why my wife and I purchased a cottage many years ago was really you're purchasing a mindset, which is you're going to a certain environment to renew, to emotionally, physically, recharge your battery, so to speak. For me, that happens in Haliburton, Ontario, where I get to spend a lot of family time with my 2 kids and my wife. And but it doesn't mean I stop thinking or stop
You don't turn
working.
your brain off completely. You can't.
Right.
So,
You're
but what
just
does that
in a
look like
different
for you? Like, are you scribbling down line combos on napkins? Are you thinking about like, okay, so one of the big storylines in training camp so far has been you're switching up the way you play defense.
Mm-hmm.
When did that come to you? Was it a group decision with the other coaches? Is it you sitting on a dock being like, you know what? We had a bunch of 1-goal losses to Vegas that we could do this a little better, a little different.
Well, I think my philosophy would be that when you do your work, things become clear. And so the first phase in that process is making sure that you're really doing your work. You're diving in. You're constantly pushing to find answers. And I think that's what all coaches at the highest levels do. I think for me, when I remove myself from the city I work in and go to Ontario, it just frees me up on the mindset side of things. I think I do spend a lot of time fishing out on the water. That allows me a relaxed environment to let things...
To think of zone defense?
Well, to think of different ways we want to go. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm a very fortunate person because I'm surrounded by a high quality staff that does their own work, that is unafraid to surface different types of ideas. I think it's my job and it's incumbent upon me to make sure my ears are open, I listen, I weigh, I make a decision, and then I move forward. For me to do that in the environment of Haliburton, Ontario, that's just where I feel relaxed. And as I said, it doesn't mean that your brain isn't working. It's just you're working in a different environment. And I think when you make those type of decisions, you want to make sure that you are looking at things clearly, soberly, below surface level, and that you have the confidence that you've done the work required to make good decisions.
So my guess is, knowing you a little bit, that you're probably not also making that decision in a vacuum. Who is part of your support system? Who do you... Maybe, and I don't mean in this organization. Who do you call? Who's in your group that you trust, that you bounce things off of?
Well, I would start in this organization because we have a lot of really quality resources available to the coaching staff. So for me, the coaches that we have are excellent. And I bounce things off them all the time. I give them projects. I ask for their opinion and seek and value their opinion. We also have a Hall of Fame general manager that has been there, done that, and seen most things in the hockey world over his numerous years working in Detroit's organization, and certainly in the last 5 years working for Edmonton here. I have a real good relationship with Paul Coffey, who is a Hall of Fame player and is working within our organization. But I think you also spend a lot of time talking to other coaches as well.
You got to give me a name.
Well, you know what? Ken Hitchcock is someone that I've come to really value my conversations with. Paul Maurice is somebody that I speak with.
Also loves to fish.
Also, yeah, he has his cottage up in Manitoba. But he's just, anytime I call, he's very generous with his time and picks up when I do call him. But, some of the younger, newer generation coaches like John Hines, I have a real good relationship with as well. Obviously, you know my friendship and history with Todd McClellan. I think when you're in the position that you're in, that I found myself in, you haven't got there by yourself. And I realize that. I have worked alongside a lot of really good people. I seek the counsel and advice from a lot of very learned and smart hockey people. And I'm a fortunate person because when I call, they pick up.
But you can't call Todd McClellan now, can you?
Well, what
You guys
Todd
are division
McClellan and I
rivals.
would talk about would be more on a personal family
gotcha.
level. Obviously, we're in the same division. We've had 2 real good playoff series against each other. It's developing into quite the rivalry. They have a great team, and they've done a great job as a coaching staff with that group. And, we've played a lot of games against each other over the last few years.
And a lot of important games, and he really knows this team too. Does that make it difficult to go head-to-head?
No, because I realize that it's not Jay versus Todd. It's the Edmonton Oilers versus the Los Angeles Kings. And, I know he's going to give his best to try and help his team win. And I certainly going to give my best to help provide leadership for our team and come up with a game plan. We've played 2 really competitive playoff series and a lot of real competitive games over the last year and a half or so.
How do you think you've changed as a coach, especially since getting to the NHL?
Well,
as a head coach.
As a head coach, I think I began in the American League as a head coach, but having spent a lot of time as an assistant coach in the National Hockey League. So I really enjoyed coaching at the American League level because of where the players were at in their career stage. They were this close to the NHL, and you had a real wrapped audience of people that would do things to try and find a way to push through to get to the National Hockey League. It also allowed me, away from the bright lights, to be able to experiment with some things and work on things without the scrutiny of national media or fan bases media, and just kind of go about finding some of the, not finding, but refining some of my philosophies that I hold dear as a coach. The way it worked out when it came up to Edmonton in February of 2022, the one advantage that I had was I had some established relationships already with key players that were already here. There were the players that I had
helped push here.
Well, yeah, well, that I helped in the American Hockey League, and they knew me as a head coach. But I had established relationships with the leadership group already in place because I had been an assistant coach for 3 years. They knew me. They understand my value system. They understand the way I speak and communicate. And that was a real advantage for me as a coach. Your initial question was, how have I grown? I think experiential learning is key, not only for players, but for coaches. I learn from our players every day about how they react and respond to different type of stimulus, different types of information being presented to them, different types of communication styles being presented to them. For me, I learn every day from our players and the people around me here in Edmonton.
Is there any change or evolution in how you approach, so when you first got here, there was maybe a little bit of a different set of expectations. You've now helped get this team to that spot where that becomes a reality. But at the same time, you also came in with, right or wrong, a reputation as someone that can develop and help players, especially some of the younger guys. How do you manage that this year when it's go time?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to how far this team has come in a year and a half. 7 points out of the playoffs to where it is being held by the media and outside people in the regard that we're being held in. That's a compliment for how much work has been done over the last year and a half. I think as a coach, what I try and do is block out all of that outside noise, put our import and our focus and our concentration on what we feel is most important. The other day, we're sitting here in training camp. The other day, probably a week ago or so, I met with the team for the first time, and I let them know that I wanted 2 things taken care of. The first thing being, take care of your day. because that's really all we can take care of. We can't worry about things that are 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now or things in April, May, and June. We have to take care of our day. If we do that, I believe things will take care of themselves. We got to get the most out of our day, whether it's a game day, practice day, or recovery day. We have to make sure we're doing things properly. And the other thing was to make sure that we're working towards a standard. We're fortunate. We work for the Edmonton Oilers. There's a standard in place. Our job is to add to that legacy by pushing through. And the way you do that is by taking care of your day. That was my message to our team a week ago.
Is that how you prevent the expectations, the preseason Stanley Cup favorite, from becoming daunting?
Yeah.
It's, you've got a slog ahead of you, and none of it's guaranteed.
Right. You know what? I think we have the challenge of an 82-game schedule in front of us. Our job during training camp, this 2.5 weeks here in training camp, is to make sure we're putting a foundation in place that will help meet the challenges of that 82-game schedule. It's not easy. I think a few years ago, the team started very well. It was 16-4 out of the gates, then hit a rough patch. We want to make sure that the work that we're doing now is going to help sustain us. We're realistic. We're not you're going to be immune to forms of adversity during a long season.
I mean, not even last season was easy.
Right.
You hit a patch in January or before that you were right on the cusp.
Right. You know what? We had some injury trouble early. Obviously, the horrific injury to Evander Kane, but Yamamoto was out, McLeod was out, Fogle was out. 4 of our top 9 forwards at one point were out all at the same time. So we were treading water for a while, and then we really took off there in January. So we understand that. It's not going to go perfectly, but we don't want to be perfect. We want to be present. We want to take care of our day every day.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking earlier about confidence in terms of your process, just something as simple as, or maybe not even as simple as, but when it comes to like the defense that you're implementing, playing a different style, where does you talked about your process and where the confidence comes from, but in terms of executing that, like, why did you want to do that?
Well, I would say this. I think what's being presented in the media is a bigger thing than it really is. I think there are small tweaks that all teams try and implement, and the best time to implement that is when you have time to practice, which happens during training camp. So for us, we're introducing some small tweaks. We do that every year. It's just for us, we're spending more time in specific areas. And as a coaching staff, we were talking about it this morning. We would compare it to an onion, which is at the core of the onion is what you hold most dear, the nucleus to your belief system.
And what is that?
Well, for us, in February of 22, we came in, we knew that we couldn't address 10 different areas. We had to be very specific, and that was our work back to our own end. Some people call it back checking. Some people call it
There's all sorts of different words, pressure, back pressure,
right,
whatever
all
it is.
That type of stuff. So,
right.
But that was something that we wanted to clean up at that time. And now, if that was the nucleus of our belief system, last year heading into training camp, I heard how the Oilers were only a perimeter-only offense team, a team that only relied on their power play, a team
power play merchants.
Well, and a team that only had success offensively off the rush. So that was an area that we wanted to address. Now, all of a sudden, now we're known as a team that can wear you down on a forecheck or on a cycle. And we ended up leading the league in goals last year. So we don't want to lose those things. Those are important.
But those are layers to the onion. They're not the core.
Exactly.
So what is the core?
Well, the core was the back checking and
it still is?
That work ethic back to our end. We're not going to lose that. We don't want to lose the work that we put into our forecheck and cycle game. And now you'll have to wait and see what the next layer to the onion is going to look like.
Okay. Well, I'm going to leave you with this then. Fill in the blank. this season will be a success for the Edmonton Oilers if?
We take care of our day and take care of our standard.
Process in place. Jay Woodcroft, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.